The lunch crowd was loud that Saturday, as sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Willow and Thyme, a classy downtown restaurant known for its cozy charm and 5-star reviews. The polished silverware sparkled, the linen tablecloths were spotless, and the scent of rosemary chicken drifted through the air. Couples laughed over wine. Servers moved in a practiced rhythm, and everything looked like just another normal day. But no one in that restaurant could have imagined that something small, so small it could have gone unnoticed, was about to change everything. A young black woman named Olia stepped inside, adjusting her simple yet elegant coat. She walked confidently, head held high, her posture quiet and powerful. Her soft curls were neatly tucked behind her ears, and her eyes scanned the restaurant with calm ease. She wasn't wearing designer labels or flashy jewelry. To most, she looked like any other customer. She didn't expect to be treated differently. Why would she? But from the moment she walked in, eyes turned not all, but some, and among those was a waiter named Chase. He was young, in his late 20s, with a tight smile and a stiff posture. He wasn't new at the restaurant, but he certainly wasn't known for warmth, and the moment his eyes landed on Olia, something shifted in his face, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. Chase didn't walk toward her. He didn't greet her like the others. He stayed near the host stand, arms folded, expression unreadable. Olia paused for just a moment. Then she walked toward the corner table she and her husband had always loved, right near the window, with the ivy growing just outside. She placed her purse gently on the chair and sat down, waiting. That's when Chase finally approached. "Excuse me, miss," he said with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This section is actually reserved for frequent guests." Olia raised an eyebrow, glancing at the empty tables all around. "I've sat here many times," she replied, her voice calm, polite. He shrugged. "It's restaurant policy. I can seat you somewhere else, near the back, perhaps." A few nearby customers glanced up, sensing the tension. Olia looked at him carefully for a second. She knew this wasn't about policy. It never really was. But she didn't make a scene. She stood up and followed him without a word, letting him lead her to a table far from the windows, tucked near the kitchen door. Noisy, drafty, and clearly not prime seating. She sat quietly, opened the menu, and waited again. Chase didn't bring water. He didn't check in. Minutes passed, and the warmth of the restaurant faded into discomfort. Servers passed by, taking care of other guests, laughing, smiling. But Olia sat alone, ignored. At the next table over, an older couple noticed the odd treatment. The woman leaned over and whispered to her husband, "Why hasn't anyone taken her order?" Olia didn't look around. She'd seen this before in stores, in meetings, in places where people assumed based on nothing but skin. Just as she was about to stand up and leave, Chase finally returned holding a small notepad like it was a burden. "Ready to order?" he asked, not making eye contact. She nodded, "Yes. I'll have the lemon chicken, no capers, and a sparkling water." He scribbled it down without a word and walked away. No thank you. No smile. Nothing dotted. Another table. A black teen named Jordan sat with his younger sister. They were just finishing lunch, laughing over dessert when Jordan noticed the way the waitress smiled at them, then stiffened when she saw Olia. He noticed the way Chase had looked at her. Jordan had seen this before too many times. He leaned over to his sister, whispering something. She nodded, her little eyes full of questions. Across the restaurant, a heavily pregnant white woman entered. She looked exhausted, one hand on her back as she scanned the busy dining room. No seats were open. She sighed and looked around helplessly. Jordan didn't think twice. He stood up and walked toward her. "Mum, would you like to sit here?" he asked politely, motioning to his seat. The woman blinked in surprise. "Oh, that's so kind of you." He smiled, helped her sit, and walked over to wait near the front until his sister finished eating. The woman glanced back at him, touched. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded paper, scribbled something on it, and handed it to the hostess. "Give this to that young man before he leaves," she whispered. Meanwhile, Chase returned to Olia's table with a plate. It wasn't lemon chicken. It was fish full of capers and a side salad she hadn't ordered. "This isn't what I ordered," she said quietly. Chase shrugged. "Kitchen's backed up. It's this or nothing." A few gasps quietly rippled through nearby tables. Someone murmured, "That's not right." Olia stared at the plate. She took a breath, counted to 3 and looked up. "Is the manager in today?" she asked softly. "No need to involve the manager," Chase said, his tone sharper now. "It's just lunch. Take it or leave it." She smiled faintly. "That's all right. I'll wait for my husband. He should be here any minute." Chase scoffed and walked away, muttering something under his breath. One table nearby had pulled out their phones, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Jordan watched all of this from the entrance. He was about to leave when the hostess stopped him and handed him the folded note. He opened it slowly. The woman had written, "Your kindness doesn't go unnoticed. Call this number. It's time someone helped you back. Dr. Claire Bennett." His eyes widened. That name. He recognized it. But how? Back at the table. Olia looked up as the restaurant door opened again. A tall, well-dressed man entered. Removing his coat, he scanned the room and walked straight toward her table. Chase happened to pass by just then and scoffed. "Can I help you, sir? We're not taking walk-ins." The man paused, stared directly at Chase and said, "You've already helped more than you know." He turned and kissed Olia gently on the cheek, and at that moment everything in the restaurant changed. The moment Olia's husband kissed her on the cheek, Chase froze. It was like watching someone realize too late that they had made a mistake. Only this one couldn't be undone with a quick apology or a polite smile. The man standing beside Olia wasn't just confident, he carried himself with quiet authority. His name was Marcus Taylor, and unknown to most of the staff including Chase, he was one of the silent partners who had helped build Willow and Thyme from the ground up. Marcus pulled out the chair next to Olia and sat down slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. The couple at the next table, who had been watching everything, gave him a respectful nod. Chase shifted uncomfortably, trying to act like he had somewhere to be. But Marcus wasn't going to let him walk away that easily. "Is this how your staff usually treats guests?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but steady. Chase's mouth opened, but no words came out. Olia didn't say anything either. She didn't need to. Her husband's presence was enough, the energy. In the room shifted, the laughter had died down, the forks had paused in mid-air, and conversations were now whispers. Even the kitchen door stopped swinging. "I didn't know she was with you," Chase finally said, his voice low. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That shouldn't matter." Chase nodded quickly, almost too fast. "Of course, sir. You're absolutely right. I just thought she might be lost or didn't belong here," Marcus asked. Finishing the sentence Chase didn't have the courage to complete. Chase's face turned red, and he took a step back. "I'm very sorry, sir. It won't happen again." But Marcus didn't look convinced. He glanced down at the plate in front of Olia, then looked back at Chase. Wrong dish. No water. Sat her near the kitchen, and then had the nerve to speak to her like a problem. Chase couldn't find a way to respond. His voice had vanished, and his feet felt like they were cemented to the floor. He looked at Olia, hoping she might say something to let him off the hook, but she simply looked back, expression calm but unreadable. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Tell me, how long have you worked here?" "Almost a year," Chase replied. "And in all that time, you never thought to ask who signs your check?" That question hit harder than anything else. Chase blinked, suddenly realizing how blind he had been. He had assumed so much from a glance. Olia wasn't just a customer. She was married to the man who had designed half the menu, picked out the table placements, and chosen this very location because of the sunlight that hit the ivy in the afternoons. And worse, he treated her like she didn't belong in a place she helped create. A waiter near the bar dropped a glass, the crash echoing through the silence. It was followed by a whisper from the older woman nearby. "Did you hear what he just said? She's the owner's wife." People began to connect the dots. The way she carried herself, the familiarity she had with the place, the calm that came from someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Back at the front, Jordan was still holding the note from the pregnant woman. He kept reading the name, Dr. Claire Bennett. It sounded familiar, not just from TV or something he'd heard once. It felt personal, like something tied to a dream he'd long forgotten. His sister tugged on his arm. "Are we going home?" she asked. "Not yet," Jordan whispered. He walked over to the hostess and asked politely, "Can I see that lady again, the one who gave you this note?" The hostess shook her head. "She already left. She said if you call that number today, she'll explain everything." Jordan looked down at the note again. Something about this whole day felt like it wasn't just coincidence. He had only given up his seat because it was the right thing to do. That's how he was raised. But this note, it felt bigger than a thank you. It felt like a door opening, and he didn't even know what kind of world was behind it. Meanwhile, Marcus and Alia stayed seated at their table. They didn't raise their voices, didn't demand to speak to a manager, didn't cause a scene. Their silence was powerful. Enough. It spoke louder than any angry confrontation could have. Marcus finally turned to his wife and gently touched her hand. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm used to it." That answer sat heavy in the air. Used to it shouldn't have been the norm. Not for someone as kind as her. Not in a place she helped build. But Alia had learned how to carry herself with grace even in the face of insult. It didn't mean it didn't hurt. It just meant she had grown stronger from every time it happened. Marcus looked toward the back of the restaurant, where a young female manager was watching nervously. She seemed like she wanted to step in, but didn't know if it was the right time. Finally, Marcus gave her a nod. She rushed over, her voice soft. "Mr. Taylor, I had no idea. It's not about knowing who we are," Marcus said gently. "It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching." She swallowed hard and nodded. "You're absolutely right." Chase had already disappeared into the kitchen, likely realizing he had messed up more than he could ever fix with an apology. Word was spreading quickly among the staff. Everyone was suddenly more attentive, more polite, more aware. Alia leaned toward Marcus. "Let's not make a big deal of it," she said softly. "Not here. Not today." Marcus nodded, respecting her wish. But the decision about what to do next wasn't finished, not by a long shot. What had happened wasn't just a moment of bad service. It was something deeper, something that spoke to how assumptions can cause damage even in beautiful spaces. At the front door, Jordan pulled out his phone. His hands trembled a little as he dialed the number on the note. It rang twice. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. Hi, my name is Jordan. You gave me a note at the restaurant." There was a pause. Then the voice said, warmly, "I was hoping you'd call." Jordan blinked. Do I know you?" "Not yet," she said. "But I know about you, and I think it's time we talked about your future." Jordan stepped outside, the breeze brushing against his hoodie. Something in her voice made him feel safe, but also curious, like this wasn't just about the seat he gave up. It was about something bigger, something he couldn't see yet. Inside the restaurant, Alia stood up. She picked up her purse and nodded to her husband. They walked toward the exit quietly, passing by tables full of stunned guests. No words were spoken, but everyone watched them go. They didn't need to explain anything. Their presence alone was enough. As they reached the door, Marcus looked back once. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The next morning, the air around Willow and Thyme felt different. It was quiet before the lunch rush, but tension hummed in the background like a low current. Staff moved faster than usual. They straightened chairs, polished glasses twice, and checked the reservation list again and again. No one talked much. Everyone had heard what happened the day before. How a simple act of disrespect had unraveled in front of a packed house. and how the woman they all assumed was just another guest had turned out to be married to the man who helped build this place from scratch. In the staff room, Chase sat alone, staring at the floor. His apron was folded on his lap, untouched. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus's face. Not angry, just disappointed. That was worse somehow. He had always believed he was professional, polite, efficient. But in one moment, he'd revealed something ugly, something he didn't even realize he still carried inside. He kept replaying it in his mind, how he looked at Olia and just assumed she didn't belong. It wasn't just the seat by the kitchen. It wasn't just the wrong order. It was the tone, the attitude. And now, no matter how many excuses he tried to make in his head, none of them felt right. In another part of town, Jordan sat on his bed, holding his phone. He hadn't told anyone about the call yet, not even his sister. He kept thinking about the woman's voice, Dr. Claire Bennett. She said she wanted to help. But who was she? And why did she sound like she already knew who he was? Their conversation had been short, but it lingered in his mind. "You're a good young man," she had said. "Kindness like yours doesn't go unnoticed. I work with youth programs mentorship, scholarships, leadership development. I think you'd be a great fit." Jordan had stumbled over his words. "Wait, are you saying you're offering me, like, a program?" "I'm saying I'd like to meet you," she had replied. "You've got something special, and we want to help it grow." He didn't know what to make of it. Was it real? Too good to be true. He'd grown up in a world where people didn't just hand out opportunities. You had to fight for them, claw your way up. But this felt different. Still, part of him wondered if she was just being kind in the moment. People say nice things all the time. It doesn't always mean they follow through. Back at the restaurant, Marcus sat in his office upstairs, reviewing camera footage. Not because he wanted to catch Chase again, he already knew what happened, but because he wanted to understand the whole picture. He watched Olia walk in, watched the hesitation in her step when Chase didn't greet her, watched her being led to the worst seat in the house. He paused the footage on Chase's face, expression flat, voice cold. Then he hit play again and watched the rest. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his forehead. This wasn't about one person. This was about something deeper. If one staff member felt comfortable acting that way, what had the culture in the restaurant become? He had poured everything into this place, late nights, long meetings, money he couldn't afford to lose, and Olia had supported him through it all. They had built this space together, believing it could be something different, a place where people felt welcomed, respected, seen. Now that belief had a crack in it. Marcus picked up his phone and texted Olia, thinking of calling a staff meeting. "I want your voice there too." She replied just a moment later, "I'll be there, but I'm not going to yell. I want them to understand." That was who she was. Even after what had happened, she didn't want revenge. She wanted growth. Meanwhile, Chase remained in the break room, unsure of what to do. Part of him wanted to walk out, never come back. But part of him knew that was the coward's way. He needed to face it. Maybe not for Marcus, maybe not even for Olia, but for himself. He stood up, slowly tied on his apron, and walked out. At the same time, Jordan and his sister made their way toward the city center where Dr. Bennett had arranged to meet him. He hadn't told his mom yet, she'd worry, or maybe think it wasn't real. But something in his gut told him to trust it. They arrived at a modern building with clean glass windows and a warm wooden interior. A sign near the door read, "Youth Futures Initiative." Jordan hesitated, then stepped inside. At the front desk, a smiling woman greeted him. "You must be Jordan. Dr. Bennett is expecting you." He nodded, holding his sister's hand tighter. They were led down a hallway to a bright room with bookshelves, plants, and photos of smiling students on the walls. Dr. Bennett stood near the window, a tablet in her hand. She looked up and smiled as they entered. "You made it," she said, warmly. Jordan nodded. "This is my sister. I didn't want to leave her home alone." Dr. Bennet knelt to the little girl's level. "You're very lucky to have a big brother like him." Then she turned back to Jordan and motioned to a chair. "Let's talk. I want to tell you about something important." At the restaurant, the staff meeting was already underway. Marcus stood at the front, arms crossed. Olia sat beside him, her expression calm but focused. "This isn't just about one incident," Marcus began. "It's about how we treat people when no one's watching, about the assumptions we make, about what kind of place we are and what kind we want to be." Chase sat in the back, listening quietly. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't try to defend himself. He just listened, and for the first time, he started to understand how much weight his actions had carried. Alia stood up. "I'm not here to accuse anyone," she said. "I'm here to ask a question. If I had come in wearing a suit, with a name badge that said co-owner, would I have been treated differently? And if the answer is yes, then we have work to do." The room was silent. No one had an answer. At least, not one they could say out loud. As the meeting ended, Marcus walked over to Chase. They looked at each other for a long moment. Chase finally spoke. "I messed up. I know that now. I'm sorry." Marcus didn't reply right away. He simply nodded once and said, "Let's see what you do next." Outside the restaurant, a light rain had started to fall. Jordan stepped out of the Youth Futures Initiative building, holding a folder filled with program details. His mind was racing. His heart was full. For the first time in a long while, he felt like someone had seen him not just as a kid from the neighborhood, but as someone who could become more. Back at home, Olia sat near the window, a cup of tea in her hand. She didn't speak much. She was thinking, processing, remembering every time someone had spoken down to her, every time she had been underestimated, ignored, or talked over. This time, at least, the silence had broken. But what came next, that was still unwritten. The silence that followed the waiter's snide remark was loud. A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending not to notice. Some looked away. One or two gave apologetic glances in the black woman's direction, but none spoke. Up, she sat still, composed, but her eyes held a storm behind them, quiet, but not calm. In the kitchen, the manager had just stepped away to take a call, leaving the waiter, Kevin, unchecked. He strutted between tables, flashing a smug grin as if he owned the place. What he didn't realize was that eyes were on him, not just the diners, but someone watching through the security cameras from upstairs. That morning had started like any other. The woman, whose name was Denise, had decided to drop by the restaurant after her morning charity board meeting. She wasn't wearing designer labels or heavy makeup. Her blouse was plain, and her jeans were slightly faded. Her natural hair was tied up in a bun, and she wore simple gold earrings. She looked like any other woman running errands on a weekday afternoon. But Denise was anything but ordinary. She was the wife of Malcolm Reed, the man who had built this restaurant from the ground up. Malcolm was known in the neighborhood not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as someone who gave back. He'd hired dozens of at-risk youth from the community, sponsored local scholarships, and quietly paid off medical bills for several families in need. He believed in second chances. That's why Kevin was still working there. Malcolm had given him a shot after a rough past, hoping it would help straighten his path. But some lessons are harder learned. Denise hadn't told anyone she was coming. She often liked to test the waters to see how staff treated people when they thought no one was watching. She believed that true character shows when no one's paying attention. And unfortunately, what she saw today reminded her of why these quiet tests mattered. Meanwhile, in the back office upstairs, Malcolm was reviewing invoices when the live camera feed caught his eye. He leaned in as he saw Kevin standing too close to a table, his face twisted with irritation. He unmuted the audio and caught only the tail end of the waiter's comment. Malcolm's jaw clenched, and his eyes narrowed. Downstairs, Denise remained calm. Kevin, emboldened by her silence, gave a sarcastic laugh and added, "You're lucky we even let you sit here today." Usually, people like you end up with takeout." His voice was low but intentionally loud enough to carry to nearby tables. Denise slowly stood. She wasn't the type to cause scenes, but something in her shifted. Years of dignity, pain, and strength pulled themselves into her posture. She picked up her purse but didn't move toward the door. Instead, she stepped toward the front counter, locking eyes with the new hostess who had only been working there a week. The girl's expression flickered with recognition. She had seen Denise before, in a framed photo hanging beside Malcolm's in the hallway near the back, upstairs. Malcolm was already halfway down the stairs. Each step felt heavier, driven by both anger and disappointment. He hadn't told Kevin about Denise. He didn't feel he had to. Respect shouldn't come from status. It should be offered freely, especially in a place that claimed to be built on family and community values. Back near the kitchen, another employee, Jake, had witnessed everything. Jake was a dishwasher and part-time busboy, but more importantly, he was loyal. He had seen Denise at charity events, had heard her speak at the local high school about grace and standing tall in the face of cruelty. His stomach turned seeing her disrespected this way. He put down the tray of glasses he was drying and quietly walked over to Denise. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve that. He doesn't speak for us." His voice cracked slightly, but it was sincere. Denise gave him a soft smile, her first real one since sitting down. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was gratitude for his kindness. Kevin, now slightly unsettled by the sudden change in mood and the murmurs growing around the restaurant, tried to backpedal. "I was just joking. People take things too seriously these days," he mumbled, loud enough for no one to buy it. At that exact moment, Malcolm entered the dining room. He didn't shout. He didn't point fingers. He walked straight to Denise, kissed her on the cheek, and turned to the staff and customers with a calm but firm presence. Kevin paled. Malcolm wrapped an arm around his wife and turned to Kevin with a look that froze him in place. "Is there a reason my wife wasn't treated with respect just now?" His voice was steady. No yelling, just power. Kevin stuttered. "Sir, I didn't know she was your wife. I thought she was just... What?" Malcolm asked. Kevin's mouth opened, but no words came out. Before Malcolm could speak again, Denise gently touched his hand. "Let him answer," she said softly. Kevin looked around the room. Every eye was on him now. There was no way out. The air was heavy. The moment hung there, thick with unspoken tension. Denise turned to Malcolm. "I'd like to speak with him, privately, if that's all right." Malcolm looked surprised but nodded. "Of course." The entire restaurant buzzed with quiet murmurs as Denise led Kevin into a side room near the office. No one knew what she was going to say, but everyone, including Malcolm, watched the door with anticipation. Meanwhile, at another table, a young black teen quietly watched the scene unfold. He was dressed in a neat school uniform, likely from the private academy nearby. Sitting across from him was a pregnant white woman, clearly exhausted and grateful for the seat he had just offered her minutes earlier. She clutched her stomach and smiled at him. He had stood without hesitation when she walked in, giving her the last open chair. The moment between them had gone unnoticed amidst the drama, but something subtle passed between them. She leaned over, whispered something, and handed him a folded piece of paper. He blinked, confused. "What's this?" She smiled kindly, her eyes misting up. "Something that might change your life." Back in the side room, Denise sat across from Kevin. The silence was sharp, yet Denise didn't raise her voice. "What were you going to say?" she asked. "You thought I was just..." "What?" Kevin looked down. "I thought you were just someone who didn't belong here." Denise's heart broke a little, not for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong somewhere, just because of how they looked. She leaned forward. "The problem isn't that you didn't know I'm the owner's wife. The problem is you think people need to earn basic respect, that it's okay to judge who belongs where." Kevin had no words, just silence, heavy, awkward silence. Denise stood up. "You should think about why you're here, because this isn't just about a job. It's about who you are when no one's watching. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving the air thick with tension, regret, and something else. Unfinished consequences. Everyone in the restaurant turned as she emerged. Malcolm stood by the entrance, expression unreadable. And as Denise passed the young teen's table, her eyes landed briefly on him and on the folded paper he now held tightly in his hand. Something was about to change, but no one knew just how much. The restaurant had grown unusually quiet. Conversations that once hummed with casual chatter had simmered into uneasy whispers. All eyes were subtly watching the corner table, where the air had thickened with invisible tension. The waiter, Derek, still stood frozen, trying to piece together what had just happened. A single sentence from Nina had shifted the atmosphere. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't called for the manager. She didn't need to. There was something about the way she spoke that unsettled him more than yelling ever could. Behind the scenes, kitchen staff had started murmuring. One of the dishwashers, Jamal, had worked at the restaurant for 2 years and had always suspected something odd about Nina's occasional visits. She didn't act like a regular customer. She didn't demand, but she observed everything. Not just the food, but the staff, the layout, even the mood. And now it was beginning to make sense. Meanwhile, Chris, the restaurant owner, was upstairs in his small office going over invoices. He hadn't heard what was happening downstairs, but his assistant manager, Karen, had watched the entire interaction between Derek and Nina from the bar. Her jaw clenched as she debated what to do. Derek had been warned before quietly and unofficially about comments that bordered on inappropriate. But now he'd crossed a line, and this time there were witnesses. And not just any witness. Nina's fingers traced the rim of her water glass, her expression unreadable. The silence from Derek was telling, but she gave him one more chance. "Would you like to try again?" she asked quietly, her eyes not hostile but firm. Derek opened his mouth, closed it again, then muttered something under his breath and walked off toward the kitchen. He knew he had messed up, but he still didn't grasp just how badly. Chris finally came down, casually wiping his hands with a towel. He walked over to Nina's table with a soft smile. "Hey, babe," he said with warmth. "Sorry, I got caught up upstairs. Did you order already?" Karen, now standing behind him, saw Derek leaning against the wall, arms crossed, clearly stewing. In his own confusion, she motioned him to follow her and pulled him into a side hallway, away from the customers. "You have any idea who the woman is?" she asked him, voice low. Derek shrugged. "She's just another customer who wants to act important." Karen's face hardened. "That's Nina Carter. She's not just any customer. She's Chris's wife. She helped him build this place from the ground up. This isn't her first time here. She's been in meetings, interviews, and design reviews. You just never paid attention." Derek went pale. His breath caught in his throat. "Wait, his wife?" Karen nodded, and she didn't make a scene because she doesn't need to. She sees everything. You don't just get away with behavior like that, not here. Back at the table, Nina was now talking quietly with Chris, recounting what had happened in a calm, matter-of-fact way. She wasn't angry, just disappointed. Chris's expression shifted from relaxed to tense, then to deeply concerned. He stood up abruptly and signaled Karen over. Customers were beginning to notice. Phones subtly appeared in hands. One couple had started filming under the table, picking up murmured bits of the conversation. They didn't know who Nina was, but the mood suggested something big was about to unfold. And in today's world, a moment of injustice caught on camera could go viral in seconds. As Chris spoke with Karen, Derek was still trying to recover. He ran his hands through his hair, sweat now dampening his collar. He realized how casually he had spoken to Nina earlier, how confidently he had dismissed her, calling her ma'am in the most sarcastic tone, offering her a cheaper wine list as if she couldn't afford more. He'd done that before, too, others. But no one ever said anything until now. Karen returned and told Derek, "Chris wants to speak with you now." In the kitchen hallway, Chris stood next to Nina, arms crossed. Derek approached cautiously. trying to force a calm expression. "Sir, I didn't mean to offend her. It was just a misunderstanding." Chris cut him off. "Derek, I built this restaurant with the help of that woman standing next to me. She's not just my wife. She's the co-owner, the co-founder, and more importantly, she's a person who walked in here today, sat down like any guest, and you judged her before you. Even asked her what she wanted." I didn't know. That's the problem," Nina said. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to." Derek's face flushed with panic. He looked around, hoping someone would jump in, say it was a joke, or that he deserved another chance. But the silence around him screamed the truth louder than words ever could. Outside the kitchen, in the dining area, the murmurs were getting louder. People were curious now. Some were beginning to recognize Nina from magazine articles about entrepreneurs and businesswomen. One younger woman whispered, "Oh my God, I think that's Nina Carter. I read about her in Forbes." Meanwhile, at a corner booth near the window, a teenage black boy sat quietly, observing all of it. His name was Jalen. He had come in alone and had given up his seat earlier at the bus stop for a pregnant white woman, an act that went unnoticed to most but not to her. She had written something on a folded note and slipped it to him with a soft "thank you," then disappeared into the crowd. Jalen hadn't opened the note yet. It sat in his pocket, heavy with mystery. But now, seeing Nina stand her ground with such quiet power, he felt something stir inside him. Respect, inspiration, a realization that dignity, once stolen, can always be reclaimed if you stand tall. The restaurant's mood shifted again. Now it wasn't just about a rude waiter or an embarrassed manager. It was about something deeper, about the assumptions people carry, about what happens when someone pushes back not with anger, but with truth. Nina glanced across the restaurant and met Jalen's eyes for a brief moment. She offered him a small nod, a silent recognition of strength. Jalen returned the gesture, and at that very second, the pregnant woman who had given him the note earlier re-entered the restaurant. Through the front door. What happened next would change everything. For a long moment, everything inside the restaurant stood still. The air, the chatter, the music, everything held its breath. Julia's eyes didn't leave the waiter's face, and he, suddenly pale, mouth parted, seemed to finally register. Something was off, not just off, deeply wrong. The other customers, sensing the shift in energy, had quieted down too. A few had noticed how tense the interaction had become, how the smiling woman at table 6, who only moments ago was calm and gracious, now looked like a storm ready to erupt, and the waiter, previously so cocky, now looked like a man waiting for the floor to give out beneath him. At that moment, the manager walked past, catching only the end of what was being said. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, glancing between them. Before Julia could respond, the waiter jumped in, laughing nervously. "Oh, it's all fine. Just a little confusion with the order. Happens all the time." His voice cracked. Julia didn't say anything. She just looked at the manager, Michael, her husband. But no one knew yet. Not even the manager realized it was her. He hadn't been expecting her to stop by the restaurant that day. She often kept a low profile, choosing not to be known as the owner's wife when she visited their different locations. Michael smiled at her politely, then turned back to the waiter. "Make sure you treat all our guests with respect, Marcus," he said, gently but firmly. "You know that." Then he walked away, still unaware. Marcus let out a breath and forced a grin. "See? All fine." But it wasn't fine. Not even close across the room. One of the servers, a young Latina girl named Rosa, had been quietly watching the entire scene unfold. Rosa had always admired Julia from a distance. She'd seen her before at the head office and recognized her, even if others hadn't. Now, she looked nervous. She wanted to speak up but wasn't sure what the right move was. Julia gently folded her napkin and placed it on the table, her meal untouched. Her eyes didn't leave Marcus's face. "Tell me something," she said, her tone deceptively soft. "Do you treat everyone like this, or do you save your worst for people who look like me?" Marcus blinked, suddenly looking much less confident. What? No, I just listen. I didn't mean anything by. Of course you did, she interrupted. Still calm, you meant every word, every sneer, every sigh, every delayed service. You meant it? You thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe you thought I wouldn't speak up. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. That one sentence made her smile bitterly. And that's exactly the problem, she said, because if you had known, you would have behaved differently, which means you know how to treat people with respect. You just choose who deserves it. Across the room, a young couple overheard the last part and exchanged glances. A few. Phones discreetly lifted. People were watching, recording, quietly documenting Dot at that moment. Rosa couldn't take it anymore. She walked over quickly, stepping next to Julia. Ma'am, she said softly, I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry. I saw everything, and you didn't deserve that. Julia looked at her and smiled gently. Thank you for your courage. Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced around nervously. Seeing eyes on him, phones in hands, whispers beginning. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Julia stood up slowly. Not rushed, not angry, just deliberate. You've been serving here for how long? 6 months, he said cautiously. And in that time, how many women like me have you looked through, spoken down to, ignored or mocked? He didn't answer. You may not remember them, she added, but I promise you they remember you. A hush fell again. The tension had climbed to a point where even the clinking of glasses seemed like thunder. Then, right on cue, Michael returned holding a bouquet. He'd just picked it up from the back kitchen. It was meant for Julia, a small surprise, a just-because gift. He hadn't known what was happening at the table. When he saw her standing there, when he recognized her, fully, for the first time his eyes widened. Babe, he said in disbelief. The entire restaurant froze. Marcus stared at Julia, then at Michael, then back again. Wait. What? Michael moved forward, confused and concerned. What's going on here? Julia didn't even look at Marcus anymore. She faced her husband, gently taking the bouquet from his hands. Your waiter here has been quite the host, she said, her voice even. Michael looked at Marcus. What did you say to her? I didn't know who she was, Marcus stammered. I thought she was just a black woman sitting alone, Michael snapped, his calm demeanor gone. You thought that gave you the right to be disrespectful? Marcus's eyes darted everywhere, trying to figure a way out, but the walls had already closed in. Michael turned to Julia. Are you okay? She nodded. I will be. The room buzzed with tension. But before anything else could be said, a voice from a corner table spoke up. It was an older man, dressed in a simple button-up shirt, white, probably in his 60s. He stood slowly, setting down his fork. Sir, he said to Michael, I didn't mean to intrude, but I saw everything. And if that's how your staff treats customers, based on how they look, you're going to lose more than just business. You're going to lose your name. Michael nodded solemnly. I hear you. And Marcus' face flushed. Hands shaking, realized that his day wasn't just going badly. It might be the last day he ever worked there. But Julia wasn't done. She looked around the room, then back at her husband. Let's not deal with this here. Come with me, she said quietly. She began to walk toward the back office. Michael followed, bouquet in hand, and the restaurant watched them go. Marcus stood frozen in place, surrounded by silence, judgment, and a decision he could never take back. And just as they disappeared into the hallway, Rosa glanced over at Marcus. Her expression was one of disappointment, not anger. You had a chance to treat someone right, she said, and you blew it. He didn't answer. The kitchen door swung once, then again. But what came next? That was still to unfold. Asterisk. For a moment, the restaurant fell into a stunned silence. Every eye was glued to the center table. Where Malik now stood, his voice calm but cutting through the tension like a blade. The manager had arrived moments earlier, wide-eyed and confused, trying to catch up with what had just happened. "Sir, is everything all right?" the manager asked cautiously, glancing between Malik and the trembling waiter. "No," Malik replied, locking eyes with the waiter. "Everything is not all right. I trusted you to treat every person who walks into this place with respect, dignity, and decency. And you just disrespected my wife." Gasps filled the air again. The waiter went pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Jasmine, who had remained composed all this time, gently stood up and stepped beside her husband. "I didn't want to embarrass anyone," she said softly, "but I wasn't going to let someone make me feel small just because of my skin or the way I look." The manager's face turned red with shock and embarrassment. He turned to the waiter. "You're done. Hand in your apron and get out. Now." But Malik raised his hand. "No," he said. "Not yet." Everyone froze again. Malik looked the waiter in the eyes and said, "I want you to hear something before you go. My wife was once homeless. She used to sleep in bus stations and eat from vending machines. She worked 3 jobs, put herself through school, and never gave up. That woman you tried to belittle built herself from nothing and now co-owns everything you see in this room." The waiter looked down, ashamed, his hands trembling as he realized the weight of his actions. Malik continued, "You didn't just insult a customer. You insulted strength. You insulted grace. You insulted the kind of person this world needs more of." And then Jasmine spoke up again. "But you also reminded me why we need to keep going. Because there are still people out there who look at someone's skin and make assumptions, who judge before listening, who mock instead of asking. And that's why we won't stop building spaces where everyone is treated with kindness." At that moment, an older black woman sitting at a nearby table wiped away a tear. She softly clapped. Then another couple joined in, and within seconds the entire restaurant broke into quiet, respectful applause. The waiter, overwhelmed and deeply ashamed, removed his apron, placed it on the table, and without a word walked out of the restaurant. Jasmine turned to Malik and held his hand. They stood there quietly for a moment before sitting back down. The manager quickly brought out the food again, freshly plated and steaming. This time, when Jasmine took her first bite, she smiled, not because the meal had changed, but because the atmosphere had. Moments later, something unexpected happened. A young teenage boy walked hesitantly up to the couple's table. It was the same black teen who had earlier given up his seat to the pregnant woman. He held a folded note in his hand. "Excuse me, ma'am, sir," he said nervously. "I saw what just happened. I just wanted to say thank you. You stood up not just for yourselves, but for people like me too." Jasmine smiled warmly and accepted the note. Malik looked at him curiously. "What's your name, son?" "Darius," he replied. "I'm 17. I want to study law one day, so I can fight for what's right, just like you did just now." Jasmine's eyes sparkled as she opened the note. Inside, the teen had written, "Thank you for showing me that being strong doesn't mean being loud. It means standing your ground with dignity." Malik patted Darius on the back and smiled. "If you ever need a mentor or an internship, come by this restaurant. Ask for me." Darius lit up like a street lamp, nodded and walked back to his table, holding his chest a little taller than before. Later that night, when the couple returned home, Jasmine sat by the window holding the note and said softly, "Funny how one bad moment turned into something powerful." Malik nodded. Because truth always speaks louder than hate. And somewhere in the city, a young teen readied himself to follow in the footsteps of justice, carrying a note that changed his life. Moral of the story: never judge people by how they look, because behind quiet strength, there's often a story you can't imagine. Respect costs nothing but can change everything. And standing up against wrong, even with calmness and dignity, can inspire more than 1,000 loud speeches.